Chuck Clark injury, Adrian Amos, Jets OTA storylines. We got a ton to get into with a special guest. Let's go. Zoinks! It is unequivocally the Super Bowl for New York Jet fans.
Field Yates, baby. Field gosh darn Yates. Let's bring him on the show.
Come on, people. Connor Rogers is joining the show. What's up, Connor? But Trevor gosh darn Sycamore, baby, for me, personally, my favorite New York Jet of all time.
Wow, it's great to be on. What an intro that was right there.
Paul, nobody does an intro like you, man.
Paul, you give the best intro of literally any podcast that I've ever done.
I'm gonna lose my gosh darn bananas.
You damn right we are. Hey, everybody, my name is Paul Esden Jr., a.k.a. Boy Green. I'm the New York Jets digital reporter for Heavy.com. Make sure you guys like the video, hit subscribe down below for more fantastic New York Jets content. We got a special guest. Let's bring him in. You already know who he is. His name is Jets Central Baby, the greatest YouTube New York Jets content creator of all time. Let's bring him here on the program. What is up, JC?
Paul, what's up, dude? How are you, man?
Yeah, I'm doing
How's
awesome.
the knee, by the way?
Well, I will say the knee is a long and arduous process, but hey, we're chipping away at it every day. And speaking of chipping away, the Jet Central merch, you're everywhere. You're this Empire King. You're putting out content. You're like, hey, pick up one of my hoodies, my T-shirts, hats. God knows what else you got going on there. I see you, man. I see you.
Thanks, dude. Yeah, I definitely got to get some stuff over to you, and yeah, I got to set up that discount code and everything like that. It's really cool.
Well, okay. Well, make sure you let people know by the end of this thing where they can pick up their own merch from you, because, of course, everyone wants to support the Jet Central Army. But let's dive right into it. And it's a little bit of a weird thing here because I get to have Zach Rosenblatt on the show yesterday. It was a pre-scheduled thing. We were going to talk for a while, and it just worked out that the Adrian Amos news happened right before we were having him on. He was cool jumping on. We talked about the Adrian Amos thing. So I'll ask you about that in a nutshell, but it's hard just to talk about that knowing what we found out a handful of hours later after that interview, that Chuck Clark reportedly suffered a very serious knee injury. So we'll start with the Chuck Clark thing first and work our way back to Amos. Brutal news. A guy they traded for a bag of Doritos to get from the Baltimore Ravens was going to be a key piece to the puzzle and now could be out for the season.
Yeah, man, it sucks. It sucks. I think I believe the Chuck Clark news came out right before the Rodgers news, not saying like 30 minutes before, but it was like it's like a couple days before, maybe even like the day before. I remember seeing that news. Oh, the Jets are trading a 7th round pick for Chuck Clark. And I'm like, a 7th and what? Like a future pick? Like what else? Because Chuck Clark's a quality player, a tackling machine, veteran. I know it's a little crappy to say this now, but he was an Iron Man for the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, it's not looking good for this season, but I was extremely pumped up, especially, him with Whitehead, 2 physical-minded safeties, 2 guys that can wrap up an open field, especially in Clark's case. So it's a blow. I don't want to sit here and speculate. Oh, is it a meniscus? Oh, is it an ACL? How long is he going to miss? I'm going to wait for that initial report. I know there's some belief that it is going to be an ACL, which is going to be a season ender, which again sucks.
Yeah, 100%. So we do not know at this current moment as we're recording this here on the show what it is, but there is speculation. Aaron Wilson believes ACL related. There's others that have said grim. He's seeking second and third medical opinions to see if, again, it's going to be something. And hopefully it is, because Chuck Clark, again, was a player I was super excited about. The safety room did not inspire a lot of confidence outside the building, outside the fan base when people looked at the safety room, but it seemed like it was destined to be better, which brings us to the Adrian Amos thing. And we knew about the signing before the Chuck Clark news, and I thought, well, great. First off, Adrian Amos, that free safety guy that could add a little bit of that, especially early in his career. And this is a guy that can intercept the football, need some of that. And then the free safety provided a lot of opportunities in theories for the Jets to play Chuck Clark or Jordan Whitehead inside the box and also have Amos over the top. And just quite frankly, depth, if an injury were to occur, for him to be a good move. So let's just go to Amos overall. What do you make of him? He's a name, another Aaron Rodgers former teammate. There's now 6 of those guys on on the Jets 90-man roster, and he brings a little chutzpah with him.
Yeah, man. When the news first broke, it was like a 1-year contract worth up to $4 million. So I'm thinking, okay, a cheap signing. Amos is he's a quality player. He's played strong safety. He's played free safety. He's a veteran. Hasn't missed a game in 5 years, which I think is important. Obviously, former Green Bay Packer, Roger teammate, so he knows him. I do think, again, when the news first broke, I was thinking to myself, like, all right, we got 3 quality safeties, 3 guys that can move around. They're not like locked into set positions. You can move these guys around the defensive backfield. They have different strengths, different weaknesses, but in the end, I felt really good about all 3 going into the season. I felt like over the last couple of weeks, I sounded like a broken record. I'm like, yeah, of course, extend Q. Of course, try to re-sign Quan Alexander. Got to restructure the Rodgers contract too. But I really wanted that third free safety, somebody who can flock sideline to sideline. I mean, if we look at all the quarterbacks with strong arms, guys that could push the ball down the field, the Josh Allens, Patrick Mahomes,
Sure.
all the wide receivers too, Tyreek Hill twice a year, Stephon Diggs twice, just CeeDee Lamb. Like, there's a lot of, I mean, the Jets have their work cut out for them this season. We're going up against a lot of potent offenses. We have to make sure that we're not getting burned in the back end of the defense where we just don't have the speed to cover, right, at free safety. And again, after that Amos signing, I was thinking, hey, we're in a good position. A couple hours later comes out, oh, Clark, he's serious knee injury. And on top of that, one thing that I read it and I'm thinking to myself, like, you know what, like this, it just was weird. I think it was Rosenblatt that pointed it out. It was either Rosenblatt or Connor Hughes, but they said that before the Chuck Clark injury, the Jets weren't in on Amos, and it was kind of like a last minute emergency thing. And then Amos selected the Jets over the Ravens because of the opportunity to start. So a little interesting, a little weird there, but yeah, tough blow for Chuck Clark, but I am extremely excited for Amos. Quick pivot though by JD.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, there was Rosenblatt on that nugget, and super fascinating. It also makes sense from the Amos perspective, right? He's kicking around with the Ravens, and it's kind of interesting. That's the whole reason Chuck Clark was traded from the Ravens to the Jets, was the crowded room and the safety thing. Amos, in theory, would have been also that third safety of Marcus Williams and Kyle Hamilton. He would have been in that role. He said, oh, wait, with the Jets, oh, I could start because of the unfortunate Clark news that, okay, great, baby, let me head over there. So I ask you this question, Jets gosh darn central. Do the Jets have the best secondary in the NFL? They already said the top 3 corners are like, hey, those corners could go up against anybody, but the safety left some questions. Now you had Amos, that guy that you said could flock sideline to sideline. Booyah! Do the Jets have the best secondary in the friggin' NFL?
It's definitely up there. I think I would say it's top 3, top 5. For me, and by the way, I think Michael Carter is going to continue taking steps in the right direction.
Oh, yeah.
I know everybody talks about Sauce. Everybody talks about, Whitehead coming over from Tampa Bay, not this past or, not this cycle, but the past one.
Right.
DJ Reed, one of my favorite free agency signings, came in, stepped up and did a great, great job. But Michael Carter in the slot, like with the amount of times quarterbacks are throwing the ball these days, like you have to have a good cover guy in the slot. So, are the Jets the best one? I think I'm going to. I don't want to put the pressure on them and say, yeah, they're definitely number 1, but I will say they're top 3, top 5 in my opinion right now. Of course, you have to kind of see another thing too that we have to factor in.
Sure.
The waiver period, guys are going to be released. There's every single offseason, there's random veterans that just don't make, they get released, or guys. Teams are fielding trade calls. Like one big name that's still being talked about. Well, obviously we saw the Dalvin Cook stuff, but Hunter Renfrow, obviously wide receiver, offensive side of the football, but that's just an example of a big name that could just be on a new team, like super late, like almost right before the season starts. So you can always factor in at least a couple big name veteran guys that could be on the move. Maybe the Jets are interested in, one of those too.
Look at Jet Central stirring the pot, baby. Are there some new sexy splashes that could be happening in New York Jets world? Very interesting. Let's stay in the safety room for a second. When Jordan Whitehead was initially signed, I remember all kinds of people talking about how great of a signing it was. Leger Douzable, who we've had on the show, he's great. Like he came out and said that Jordan White is one of the best tackling safeties in the NFL. And I went, wow, okay, Jets just added that. That's going to be great. But obviously, Jordan Whitehead didn't live up to the billing of Leger or what anyone said about this high level of play we're going to get, especially the tackling. That was probably one of the most frustrating parts of his game. Do you believe he's due for a bounce back? Obviously, the Jets do. They restructured his deal so they can't move on this year. Or it would be, it would be almost cost prohibitive to be able to do that now with their recent restructure, which kind of locked in his spot. Do you believe there's going to be this major bounce back for Whitehead this season? Do you still have concerns? Where are you at in the Whitehead camp?
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I want to see a little bit more. I think one thing that was pretty telling, I believe it came from Saleh himself, Saleh or Ulbrich, but he went out and said that having Whitehead that in the second year of the solid defense should benefit him. And that was one of the main reasons. Because, I mean, before the offseason like really started up, there was a lot of talk that Whitehead was potentially going to be cut. Along with guys like Corey Davis, and people were talking about Carl Lawson being cut and stuff like that. Whitehead was one of those guys, and the Jets held on to him. They restructured the contract. So I think it gives you a little bit of faith that the Jets like what they've seen from Whitehead, like how he projects into his second year, with the green and white here. And also going back to the point about Amos, the fact that the Jets weren't interested in safety, and you kind of have to think of this too. This is pretty much an assumption here, but if the Jets weren't interested in Amos, earlier on this week, and they quickly pivoted and signed him to a 1-year contract worth up to $4 million, when they still have to extend Q, they still have to do all these different things, restructure Rodgers and whatnot. It kind of makes you think. I think it's safe to assume that Amos was the number one safety on their list of the available guys when there's, other safeties out there, LaMarcus Joyner, John Johnson, former, Raymond Brown here, who I think could have made some sense. It's safe to assume that the Jets probably weren't interested in safety whatsoever. So I think that does bode well for Whitehead moving forward.
So let me ask you this, because maybe you've already answered it with the back end of your question, but I'll raise it anyway. Again, the Jets enter the Amos thing late. With Amos signed and in theory replacing Chuck Clark, who at a minimum appears to be out for a significant period of time, perhaps it will ultimately end up being the season based on the information we currently have present in this interview. Do you believe they're done now at safety? They just replace that 1-2 thing, or do they potentially add another safety to the mix with those depth questions now? They have Amos who replaces Clark, but they can add another guy to the mix, because in theory, that's what we thought initially. When Amos was signed, we're like, cool, we got 3 starting caliber level safeties out there. Now that number shrinks back down to 2. Could they still add that third guy, whether John Johnson or one of these other names out there, do you think?
So I think for me, the way I'm kind of looking at it is if the Jets felt they were fine with those 2, Clark and Whitehead, and now they're in a position where they lose Clark potentially for a long time, you add Amos, you spend, another, I'm just going to call it $4 million. You're assuming it's going to be $4 million at the safety position. I don't see Joe Douglas then going back into the market. I could be wrong, and spending more money there. We have a couple of younger developmental safeties on the roster. I think if I was in charge of the Jets, I would probably just, leave it how it is for now. But if it's a real issue, hope somebody develops in training camp. Hope you're fine with your top 2 in Whitehead and Amos here. But if it's an issue in the season, maybe look to go out and acquire a bigger name at the deadline. Once you have the Quinnen extension done with, you kind of have a good idea of where the cap sits next season as well. So, hey, if you're trading for a Kevin Byard, if you're looking at potentially adding one of these bigger name guys, it just makes a lot more sense. It's just like you could fit the puzzle piece right in, as opposed to dropping another contract on a free agent where it's just like, is this guy like second, third on our list right now of available safeties, which doesn't really, speak a lot of confidence in, how the Jets view that specific player. So that's kind of my mindset on it.
What do you think about the running back room? This has been a polarizing point among Jet fans. Some people are all in, like me, on the Dalvin Cook thing. Yeah, baby, let's get more insurance for Breece Hall and another guy that could carry the load early on in the season, which in theory should preserve Breece and make him even more ready when it really matters at the end of the year. And other people have been, Paul, you are a dumb idiot and you're ugly. And we think that the running back room is phenomenal. We don't need Jack Diddley, so shut up. Where do you stand, Jet Central? Do you believe I'm just an ugly, dumb animal that has no idea what I'm talking about and I should stay in my lane? Or should the Jets be dabbling in some of those waters or bringing another running back into the room to be there to provide some insurance? Where do you stand in that debate?
Yeah, so right off the bat, I love the running back room. I think when you just start going on the checklist of, attractive qualities, you have a lot of them, right? You have youth, you have depth, you have talent, you have upside, you have guys that can fit different roles within the offense, right? Michael Carter in like the passing game, Bam Knight in short goal line situations, third and shorts, fourth and shorts, stuff like that. Breece Hall obviously coming back from injury. They drafted Izzy A from Pitt, an explosive running back. I don't think running back is like a top need, but if we're talking about Dalvin Cook, it's worth a call. It's worth a call. Like, hey, I know running back isn't like we're calling all, the other 31 teams like we got it. We have to get one desperately. But Dalvin Cook is one of the best running backs in football. If he's just out on the open market and he's talking to the Miami Dolphins, to the Buffalo Bills, it doesn't hurt Joe Douglas to pick up the phone, see what he wants, inquire about the situation, not just money wise, but also what he wants, out of his new team. Does he really want to be featured? Stuff like that. Because then all of a sudden you can be in a situation where you feel really good about it. You're adding a guy in Dalvin to the offense, making the entire team better. You're taking the load off of Breece Hall, and you're essentially pulling him away from a division rival. So I think, I think it makes a lot of sense to go after it. Now, if you call him and he's like, hey, I want 15, 16 million a season, and it's a little different, right? Because it's just like the Jets can't afford it. And I think there's other things that the Jets have got to figure out. If it was a dire position of need, then it's like, all right, fork over the cash. We'll figure it out later. We have to make it work somehow. But because I feel pretty solid about running back, today, what is it, mid-June here, I'm not hitting the panic button. We got to give Dalvin Cook whatever it is, 17 million, 16, just some insane number. If it's like 8, 9, it's like, all right, let's do it up.
All right, their Jet Central believes I'm a dumb animal, so I appreciate that. In the running back room,
hey, I like both paths though. If the Jets get them, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and complain if the Jets go get Dalvin Cook. You know what I'm saying? Like, who's going to do that? But no, I feel good with both paths.
Again, I'm just hoping the Jets are right. Robert Saleh has said, hey, man, you know what? And this is one of the big comments that stood out to me about the whole Robert Saleh Breece Hall thing, is that he said, hey, we don't need to hold him back in training camp, but we will to be precautious. Like, that is such a if he's like full of smoke, then he's like one of the worst full of smoke guys ever. But like if he's saying that and he's legitimate, that Breece Hall is on this crazy trajectory and they believe he could basically be full go by training camp, which would be obviously far less than a year since he got injured in October. That's like a wow. That's a whoa comment to me, because if that's real, then obviously the Cook stuff and things of that nature are overrated. You don't need him back if Breece Hall's ready to go. We all know the dynamic talent that Breece Hall could be. It's just, man, it's just so weirdly optimistic. It's almost like I sense someone's overcompensating. Like, no, he's good, man. Are you sure? I don't know. He just towards it. No, I said he's good, man. I'm like, all right. I hope you're right, because if he is week one, obviously that's great business for everybody. But I just have some weird voice in the back of my head, and also I just look down at my robotic leg that I'm looking at right now as a guy who also tore his ACL. That, man, it's just a really hard, long process, and people recover, rehab differently, and you'd rather play it safe. And if you play it safe, does Michael Carter, Zonovan Knight, and Izzy, titillate the testicles? I'm not quite sure if I'm in that camp. I hope so. I want it to be, but I'm not so sure. So again, I'm a little iffy. Again, I hope everyone's good, but I have some questions. So I just have some questions. That's all.
Yeah, and there was also too a rumor. I think it came from like a Lions source back in the draft. Where it was that the Lions actually took Gibbs. Everybody was like criticizing the Lions. Oh, why are they taking Jahmyr Gibbs so high? I actually did not mind the move. I love Gibbs as a prospect. I think he's going to be an absolute beast for Detroit. But I understand the pushback because like all the, mock draft projections, always second round pick, late first, that's kind of where he's going to fall. One of the reasons, I don't know if this is 100% true, but one of the reasons was that the Lions selected him there because they were afraid that the Jets were going to take him behind them, before their other first round pick. So interesting stuff.
I just have to say, based on everything, all the people I know, Jet Central, I can confirm that 100%. 100%. As confident as I can say it not being Joe Douglas. Everything I've heard is that, so all of those rumors, just to share the point, the GM, Brad Holmes, the line general manager, said, hey, I think it would have been gone at 15. Who said 15? Oh, the Jets are at 15. Dane Brugler comes out and says the Jets are hot and heavy for Jahmyr Gibbs, the Alabama running back. The next day, this is the craziest thing in history, right? So first night, round one happens on Thursday. On Friday, I had a pre-scheduled interview with Jets senior reporter Eric Allen, who works for the team. We're doing an interview. Obviously, I hadn't really heard that Gibbs Jet stuff yet because I'm in the middle of a radio show. It's 10 to 12 in the morning, so I didn't have a lot of time to kind of take all that in. But Eric Allen said in the middle of the interview, man, it would have been pretty interesting if Bijan Robinson and Gibbs were on the board. And he said that, and I kind of like shrugged my shoulder like, man, he must have drank something weird this morning. There's no way he just said that. Like, that doesn't make any sense. The Jets have Breece Hall. In my brain, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And then after the interview, I see all the Gibbs, Lions, Jets stuff, and I'm like, no way. And I start texting people that I know, and they're like, it's real. And I'm like, whoa. Like, I was just losing my crap because I heard the Jet fans that were reacting, I'm not so sure about Will McDonald. I wonder what the reaction would have been if they said, Jahmyr Gibbs, because I know what the reaction would have been for Breece Hall when a mere flirtation with Zeke. He said, nah, we're good. Michael Carter, nah, we're good. 15th overall pick on a running back at your same position. And Breece Hall was all, I don't want to say angry, but when he wasn't a first round pick, he was all in his feels last year. So I can only imagine what that potential would have done. But from everything I know, Jet Central, that stuff was real, which is crazy.
Yeah, no, I love Gibbs. I think Detroit got a really good player there. It's just interesting because that's not, when you're thinking like win now team, it's just the first instant reaction, at least for me. It's different in other sports, NBA and stuff like that. But in football, it's just like, hey, if we're win now, it's like, what do we need? We have to fill that vacancy, whether it's a wide receiver, a tight end, whatever it is. And you kind of put the BPA stuff aside for a sec. If you're a horrible team, if you're picking, top 3 in back-to-back seasons, it's like, all right, let's go with the safe bet. Let's go with the franchise cornerstone, somebody we can build around. We might be okay at that position, but hey, he's an upgrade here at edge or whatever, the case may be. So no, interesting stuff.
Yeah, and again, speaking on that same tone, just because we're randomly on this detour, the Michael Mayer stuff, who, by the way, I freaking loved. My dad is a diehard Notre Dame fan, so I've watched like every Notre Dame game for like the last 20 years. So I know the rich history of Notre Dame tight ends making it to the pros. So Mayer I loved, but in the back of my head, maybe in the same sense you may have done with Gibbs with how much you liked him, it's like, well, he's cool. He's never going to the Jets, but it's cool. And then all of a sudden we hear the Joe Douglas Mayer thing and you go, because Uzomah got restructured, Conklin got restructured, you drafted Jeremy Ruckert last year with the 101st overall pick, but you're sniffing around Mayer. What do they know that we don't? If you drafted him, if you drafted Gibbs, what the hell would that have meant for other guys on the roster? It's just fascinating. It's great. That made me almost spit out my drink in a good way. A lot of fans would have been angry about the Mayer pick, not me. I love Mayer. So I said, yeah, phenomenal, awesome, would have been great. But that's another one that raised your eyebrow and kind of go, interesting.
Yeah, and I think too, like to kind of build off your point, another thing that was interesting with Mayer, he ends up going in round 2 to the Raiders.
Correct.
So I think that was like a lot of the pushback. It's like, the Jets are considering going Mayer if Will McDonald wasn't there, and Gibbs wasn't there, they would have went Michael Mayer. I mean, he would have fell to the I don't even know where he went. It was like late 30s, early 40s,
38, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, from the Raiders' standpoint, like I love the pick. They went with Wilson in the first and Mayer in the second. I think 2 impact players. But yeah, it's interesting because the Jets also had the 2 veteran tight ends in Conklin and Uzomah, and they also restructured both contracts. So whenever you like restructure a deal, it's not like you're not just going to go cut him because you just pushed more money into the future, and they have a young developmental guy in Rutgers. So it's like, man, Joe Douglas was ready to spend a first-round pick in a win-now season or a win-now window on another tight end. We'd be 4 deep at it with not many different escapes, like to get out of certain deals or clear money, getting rid of one guy or whatever the case is. So, yeah, crazy.
Yeah, Mayer, by the way, 35th overall pick, the same pick that Breece Hall ended up being for the Jets the prior year. But I mean, 35, that's basically first round territory when you talk about some of that stuff. So absolutely wild. JC, before we get you out of here, a couple of quickies. First off, we're heading towards training camp. Is there a player on the 90-man roster that isn't Sauce Gardner or Garrett Wilson or something that you're rooting for some reason, whether it's from a college you love, a young player you're rooting for some sort of a storyline? Is there a Jet Central guy on the bottom of this roster that you really like and you're really rooting for?
Yeah, Bernard Converse. I think he was either 6th round pick from LSU and Oklahoma State. Somebody who's played a lot of college ball. He's been coached by a lot of really smart defensive minds. Again, with the Cowboys and LSU, I like his from a physical standpoint. I do think he fits the NFL game and he fits what the Jets want to do. And you look at his positional versatility. He's played corner. He's played safety. And like we were talking about before with safety, if we end up needing a center fielding kind of ball hawking free safety, he's the guy on the roster that I like for, that physical upside to be that ball hawking flock type of guy. So he's the guy that I'm rooting for.
Are the Jets getting on Hard Knocks this year?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And when do you believe that ultimately comes out?
When does it come out? Probably
random guesswork here.
I don't know, within 2 weeks, I guess.
Okay, so it's okay. I'm in the same boat. I think it's happening. How, again, I don't mean to be offensive to the Bears, the Saints, and the Commanders. Let's go through them real quick. Commanders, they're in the middle of an ownership change. Why would the NFL want to highlight that? I'm sure if I'm the NFL, I'm like, behind that curtain, excellent. Any other team, like, why would I purposely highlight that? And plus, they're not that interesting. So throw them out the door. The Saints, Derek Carr. I really like everybody. I like you guys. Like, what the hell? Hell no. Yeah, boop. Throw them out. And the Bears, I think, are remotely interesting. The number 1 overall pick trade thing. They got Justin Fields is kind of interesting. But, let's look around. Let's be honest here. I mean, for Pete's sake, Aaron Rodgers, the Jets, have been the story of the offseason. Of course, that's where Hard Knocks wants to go. So any of this, campaigning for some of these other teams, I'm kind of like, not to be the top 1% condescending guy looking downward, but come on, people. I mean, obviously, it should be the New York Jets, but neither here nor there. One last Hard Knocks thing. What do you make? Before I influence you, as I do with all my questions, what do you make of the people that scream distraction with Hard Knocks? What do you say to those people?
It could be. I mean, my take on Hard Knocks has always kind of been, I want to do what the players want to do. I want to do what the coaches want to do. If coaches are acting differently, if players are acting differently because, they're on like a national media spotlight now all of a sudden where it's just like weird or like private conversations are now being like broadcasted to everybody. And now you're not really acting the same. You feel uncomfortable coming to work. Then just get them out of there. Like I don't want anything to do with Hard Knocks. Plus they already have One Jets Drive, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And that doesn't really strike me as something to where it makes players uncomfortable. But there's been situations with Hard Knocks in the past where it's just like, I get it for like the reality TV aspect of it. And, people really fans and whatnot really enjoy it. Which I do too. I try to watch Hard Knocks I missed it the last couple of seasons, but back with the Jets, it was super, super entertaining with Rex and, Danny Woodhead and that whole storyline and the Revis holdout, LT, like all these crazy things. So, again, from a fan perspective, like watching it on TV, yeah, it's going to get you hyped up. Yeah, it's going to be sweet to kind of get that behind the curtain look. But again, I only really care what the coaches, what the players feel. I don't want these guys feeling uncomfortable, at work. If they're going to, ultimately be more successful without them there, then yeah, I don't want them there.
What a politician you are. You're like, I'm looking out for the players. I'm looking out for the coaches. What they want is what I want. That's just, for me, hell no, I don't give a flying hoot what the players or coaches say. Give me Hard Knocks. Give me content. Give me storylines. Give me all that stuff. Like, because One Jets Drive is awesome, but like Hard Knocks has a bigger budget. They've got a bigger team. They could do even more. So it's just more content that we wouldn't be getting otherwise. It's not like, in my opinion, that it's taking away from One Jets Drive or taking away from this, we're still going to get all that and Hard Knocks. I'm a greedy bastard. I want as much Jets content as possible, especially with this particular season where it's supposed to be amazing. It's supposed to have Aaron Rodgers. It's supposed to have all these cast of crew and characters. The more content, the better. I am 24/7, 365 Jets anyway. So now I have to somehow find 25 and 28 extra hours in time of my life to absorb even more. But that's something, again, I'm totally open to. Jet Central, before we get you out of here, set it up for us, man. Where can people find your content if somehow, some way they have no idea who you are and what you do and what you represent? Give it to us here in front of this large audience on Heavy on Jets, my YouTube channel, and Twitter and everywhere else.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, man, thanks so much for having me on. I always look forward to doing these with you. It's so easy, so effortless. It's just cool how just a simple text, just like, hey, let's do a quick 30-minute live stream. It's awesome. But yeah, I run a Jets YouTube channel called Jet Central, pretty much doing the same thing as Paul over here.
Yeah, well, it's beautiful, guys. Make sure you tune in. Again, the Jet Central YouTube channel. I put JC synonymously when anytime Jet News comes, boom, he's there. I'm like, how did he even know about this before anyone else? But boom, he's there in his car. He's there anywhere. It doesn't matter. He gives you the update videos of all the juicy stuff. So it's phenomenal. Brother, thanks for joining us, and I'm sure we'll be doing something again very soon.
Yeah, dude, thanks so much.
There he is, Jet Central. Make sure you guys subscribe to him on YouTube.